Okay, so I have the National AIDS Memorial Former Memorial Site presentation, and as you can see by this logo, on the left is the National AIDS Memorial Grove, and on the right is the National AIDS Memorial Quilt. What is the National AIDS Memorial Grove? Today, the Grove is a garden site that is visited by thousands yearly. In the very beginning, it was the De La Vega Dell, which was part of the Golden Gate Park, but eventually, due to budget cuts and lack of funding, it was actually just an unusable, forgotten space that was really overgrown and nobody really went there. Eventually, there was a small group that got interest in this area and wanted to make it the AIDS Memorial. The grove was transformed into the beautiful place of mourning and remembrance thanks to various architects, community leaders, volunteers, professionals, and they cleared the overgrown plants and they actually reintroduced those native species, plants, and shrubs back into the area and just maintained them a little bit better. Today they also added a few larger construction sites like the Flagstone Gathering Area, multiple Sierra granite boulders like you can see on the right, and 8 freestanding benches. There's also 17 defined areas from plants and shrubs and gardens that are maintained by the volunteers and a full-time Grove City gardener. On the right, you can see one of the entrance boulders. It says National AIDS Memorial Grove, and on the left is an up close of that plaque that's on that boulder, and it reads Dedication on World AIDS Day, December 1st, 2017, and it's in recognition of President Bill Clinton that signed the law to make the National AIDS Memorial Grove a national site of mourning. Who was this memorial for? Well, this memorial was really intended for everybody. It's meant to remember all of those taken from AIDS, especially the ones taken in the height of the epidemic in the 1990s, 1980s, late 1970s. And it's also meant for their families, people that lost their fathers, their mothers, their brothers, their sisters, their husbands, their wives, really anybody that was affected by this epidemic. But it's also meant for people that didn't really know anybody, but they just want to sit and they want to learn and they want to have the serenity of what this park is really for. On these pictures on the right, you can see the flagstone floor where there are names of people that were lost due to the epidemic, and they're engraved on this. A common practice is for people to leave flowers for these people, as you can see in the picture on the left and the picture on the right. The AIDS epidemic, as many people know, AIDS begins as HIV. And eventually progresses into AIDS. And it's believed to have begun around 1920 when in the Democratic Republic of Congo, a chimpanzee was believed to cross this HIV virus over to humans. Up to the 1980s, it was really unknown that many people were infected with the virus because the symptoms are relatively unnoticeable, and for such a new virus, people weren't really looking for those symptoms. It's estimated that the AIDS epidemic began in the late 70s, with the exception of a few cases that were reported in the early 1970s. But by the end of the 1980s, the HIV/AIDS virus had already spread to 5 different continents. People that were at high risk for this virus were homosexual men, intravenous drug users that shared needles. Like many people know, needles can be very dangerous, especially with a bodily fluid transmitted disease. People that received blood transfusions, as hospitals weren't really testing for the HIV virus in the early stages of the epidemic. And then women that were sexual with people that were also infected. By 1999, the World Health Organization actually declared that AIDS was the 4th largest cause of death worldwide. and in Africa, it was the number one cause of death. Today, it's still a very high cause of death in Africa. At the time, in 1999, it was estimated that nearly 14 million people had died of AIDS since the beginning of this epidemic. So in about 20 years, 14 million people died from this one single virus. As you can see by these images, the image on the right is showing people in the United States that were diagnosed with AIDS, and then also the deaths of AIDS. As this virus begins with HIV and then slowly progresses into AIDS and then slowly to death, people that were diagnosed with HIV in late 70s to early 80s, they really wouldn't be diagnosed with the full-blown AIDS until about the 90s, as you can see here, and then about half of the people had also died from this. The image on the right really shows how worldly this virus was in the late 90s to early 2000s. South Africa, where it began, you can see nearly 20% of their population has HIV/AIDS. And then in other developed countries like the United States, Asia, Russia area, 1 to 5% of their population has AIDS, which is really crazy when you think about how many people are really in these countries, and in turn, how many people have the virus. About the AIDS Memorial Grove. So on the image on the right, you can see how it was previously the De La Vega Dell, and now is the AIDS Memorial Grove. And on the right, you can see another one of those boulders where it has names engraved in it that were taken from AIDS, and it reads a saying that says, "They were young and golden, but they came on pain here, and their youth is aged now. Their gold is gray." Originally, the grove was meant as a site for memorial and safe and positive vibes for those affected by the AIDS epidemic. And the idea was conceived in 1988. So if you think about that, that's really part of the height of the epidemic. They were looking for positive signs that they could get out and really lift spirits. After the renovations began in 1991 to clear up this De La Vega Dell Park, Nancy Pelosi ran the initiation, signed by Bill Clinton, to declare the grove as a National AIDS Memorial Site in 1996, only 5 years later. They declared the space as a public place where anyone touched by AIDS can grieve openly without fear of stigmatizing. This was a big thing because in the time of the AIDS pandemic, it was very heavily stigmatized and looked down upon because of the relationship between AIDS and homosexuals. Today, the place is for hope and healing, remembrance, and it's really a marker for the dreadful time in history where they were fighting against this disease. Today, the memorial also includes the grove that we're talking about, the AIDS memorial quilt that was in the logo at the beginning of the PowerPoint. It includes storytelling programs, scholarships, and they live by the mission to ensure that lives lost to AIDS are always remembered. This grove has multiple different sections to it, but a few of them are the main entrance where there's a 7-ton boulder that welcomes all with the inscription that says National AIDS Memorial Grove, as we saw on a few slides prior to this one. There's the Circle of Friends, where it reads, "Lives touched by AIDS, donors to the grove, those who have died, those who have loved them." And it really encompasses that all people are welcome here. Anyone that was touched by this deadly virus. And from this Circle of Friends, you can also see that there's names engraved onto the flagstone floor, where, again, it's a common tradition to leave flowers. Another section of this memorial is the Fern Grotto, where there's a poem by Tom Gunn, which is inscribed, "Walker within this circle, pause. although they died of one cause, remember how lives were dense, with fine, compact difference. And this is dedicated to all those that were unidentified, but fell victim to AIDS. It encompasses that AIDS, although all these people died of just one single cause, the AIDS virus, they were also vastly different. Another section within this grove is the Crossroads Circle. Here at the western edge of the meadow, there is a tribute to women and children affected by the AIDS virus. And this meadow really is dedicated to the women and children. And then lastly, the section, the Redwood Circle, it signifies the end of the memorial with 10 boulders, but those boulders also have inscriptions, dedications, and remembrances on them. The most notable one is the Angel Rock, which is meant to honor the angels in the grove.